Between 1350 and 1600, over 24,000 medieval taverns and alehouses across England served as centres of social life, hosting everything from brawls to illicit affairs to disease transmission. Nights out were wild and often deadly, but for people with brutally short lifespans, the tavern was both an escape and a risk worth taking. Here's what medieval nights out were really like. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's medieval nightlife. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really, check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled, trust me. Once we've dived into the dark, sticky floors of a medieval tavern, you're gonna appreciate your clean sheets way more. Your eyes crack open to darkness. The hard straw mattress beneath you has left a pattern of tiny indentations across your back and legs. The smell hits you immediately. Stale beer and sweat, mixed with something earthy that you can't quite place. You're in the back room of the Boar's Head Tavern, one of the most popular alehouses in your small English town. Get up, you useless lump. We open in an hour. The tavern keeper's wife is standing over you, her face pinched with annoyance. You rented this tiny space for the night when you were too drunk to make it home. Smart move, considering the night watchman would have thrown you in the stocks for public drunkenness after curfew. 5 more minutes, you mumble, then immediately regret it as she dumps a bucket of cold water on your feet. Now! She barks, and you're up, your head pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. So this is what a medieval hangover feels like. Not much different from a modern one, except you don't have Advil or clean water or literally any of the comforts you're enjoying right now in your cozy bed. Imagine the worst hangover of your life, then add the smell of 1,000 unwashed bodies and the knowledge that your medical treatment options include bloodletting and leeches. You stumble to your feet, which is when you realise you've lost one shoe. Perfect. Those cost you 2 weeks' wages. You're a craftsman, a cooper, which means you make barrels for a living. Not a terrible job in 1577 England, especially since your main clients are taverns and alehouses. Fun fact that I spent way too long researching. England at this time had approximately 24,000 alehouses. That's one for every 142 people. For comparison, modern London has about one pub for every 2,000 people. These people drank a lot. As you shuffle out of the back room into the main tavern area, you see the morning preparations beginning. The tavern keeper's daughter, Eliza, is sweeping the packed dirt floor. It doesn't really help with the smell, but at least it clears away the larger chunks of whatever that is. "Morning, Master Cooper," she says with a smirk. "Father says you were singing about the Queen's undergarments last night. Lucky the constable wasn't here." You feel your face flush. Did you really? That's treason talk. People have lost their tongues for less. "I don't remember that," you mutter. "Course you don't," she laughs. "You also tried to challenge Walter the blacksmith to a wrestling match. He picked you up with one hand." Okay, picture this. Medieval taverns weren't like modern bars with their clean counters and health inspections. The alehouse you're standing in right now is literally someone's house where they brew ale and let people drink it. This particular one is about the size of a modern bedroom. Maybe 40 square feet of space. When it's packed with people at night, you're basically pressed against everyone else, which explains why disease spreads so damn fast. Eliza hands you a wooden tankard filled with small beer, the weak morning ale that everyone drinks because the water will literally kill you. It tastes like liquid bread with a hint of whatever might have been in this unwashed cup before you, but it helps with the headache, so you gulp it down. "Your friend's outside," she says. "The one with the—" She gestures vaguely to her face. "Ah, that would be Richard, your apprentice. Poor kid has a port wine-stained birthmark that covers half his face. People either stare or look away quickly. Medieval folks were superstitious as hell, and anything different marked you out. Richard's lucky, though. A century earlier, and they might have drowned him at birth, thinking he was touched by the devil. Wait, it gets better. By better, I mean worse." You stumble outside into the weak morning light. The narrow street is already busy with people. A woman emptying her chamber pot nearly hits you. She's supposed to yell "Gardyloo" as a warning, but most people don't bother. You dodge just in time. The streets are basically open sewers with a thin layer of straw thrown over them to soak up the everything. "Master, there you are." Richard hurries over. He's carrying your lost shoe. "You left this at the Prancing Pony. The barmaid says you owe her 6pence for the broken chair." You groan. "Another chair? That's the 3rd this month. Not like your bed at home where you can just, lie down without breaking anything." "Did I do anything else stupid?" you ask, dreading the answer. Richard looks uncomfortable. "Well, you might have told everyone you once made a barrel for the king, and that it was the finest barrel in all of Christendom." You close your eyes. And William the tax collector was there, said he'd be by your shop today to reassess your property value, seeing as you're doing such fine royal work now. This is your life in medieval England, one drunken boast, and suddenly your taxes go up, and you can't just move to another town. Travel is dangerous, expensive, and most places require you to have a sponsor or join a guild before you can work there. Speaking of dangerous, you need to get to your workshop before the tax collector arrives. Maybe you can bribe him with a small cask of that French wine you've been hiding. Medieval corruption is so common, it's basically just how business works. As you and Richard start walking, you pass the town pillory. There's a man locked in it, his head and hands stuck through the holes in the wooden board. His crime is written on a paper above him: drunkenness and lewdness. You can bet he's facing a lot worse than just a hangover this morning. "That's John the miller's son," Richard whispers. "Got caught with the baker's wife, in the baker's bed." "While the baker was where?" you ask. "At the tavern," Richard replies. You both laugh, though not too loudly. The man in the stocks looks miserable as people throw rotted vegetables at him. This is entertainment in medieval times. Public humiliation is basically Netflix. "Throw a good one for me, Margaret," a passing woman calls to another who's taking aim with what appears to be a very soft turnip. "Oh, I will, Bess. He tried the same with my daughter last Easter." The women cackle as the turnip makes a satisfying splat against John's forehead. Your head is still pounding as you continue down the street toward your workshop. The town is coming fully awake now. Shopkeepers are setting up their stalls, apprentices are running errands, and the church bell is ringing for morning mass. You should go. Everyone should go daily. But like many, you attend mainly on Sundays and holy days. The church controls almost everything in medieval society, but people have always found ways around the rules. "Master, look," Richard nudges you and points to a man stumbling out of another tavern, the Crusty Loaf, a place known for its cheap wine and cheaper company. The man is clearly still drunk from the night before, his fine clothes rumpled and stained. "That's Lord Pembroke's son." You pull Richard away quickly. "Don't stare," you hiss. "That's how you get a beating." Class divisions are serious business. That young nobleman might be a drunken mess, but he could still have you flogged for looking at him wrong. "But he's wearing different clothes than yesterday," Richard insists, "and his purse is missing." "Ah, now that's interesting. Even noblemen aren't safe from tavern thieves and cut purses. The night brings a certain equality and vulnerability." You arrive at your workshop, a small building attached to your even smaller home. Your wife, Agnes, is already up and has a fire going. She takes one look at you and shakes her head. Again, husband? What was it this time? The ale at the Boar's Head or the wine at the Pony? Both, you admit, collapsing onto a bench. And possibly something in a very small cup that tasted like fire. You're lucky, she says, but there's no humour in her voice. Martin the Chandler never came home last night. His wife just came by asking if I'd seen him. A chill runs through you despite the warm morning. People disappear in the night sometimes, robbed, murdered, or simply fallen into the river while drunk. Life is fragile here. Death is everywhere. I'm sure he'll turn up, you say, but you both know it might not be good news when he does. Agnes hands you a piece of brown bread and a small cup of ale. Breakfast of champions. Well, breakfast of everyone, really. Unless you're rich, this is pretty much what you eat every morning. The widow Simmons came by, Agnes says casually, too casually. Says her son wants to apprentice. You groan. The widow Simmons has been trying to get her boy into a trade since her husband died. She's also been trying to get into your bed for just as long. Agnes, I already have Richard. I can barely afford to feed one apprentice. She's offering 10 shillings, Agnes says, raising an eyebrow, and she'll provide his food for the first year. That is actually a very good offer. 10 shillings is about a month's earnings for you. Is this about the money, or is it about keeping the widow away from your husband? Richard pipes up, then immediately looks like he regrets speaking when Agnes glares at him. The boy needs a trade, she says firmly, and we need the money, especially if your master keeps drinking it away. You wince. She's not wrong. Medieval household economics are precarious at best. One bad season, one robbery, one fire, and your family could be begging in the streets. Oh, think about it, you mutter, finishing your bread. Think about it with a clear head, Agnes advises, then adds, there's a letter for you, from London. Now that's unusual. Letters are expensive and rare. Most people go their whole lives without sending or receiving one. You frown, suddenly nervous. The only person you know in London is your brother, who works for a wine merchant. Agnes hands you the folded paper, sealed with a blob of wax. You break it open carefully, and Richard leans in unashamedly to look. Privacy is not really a concept in medieval times. Your home has one room where everyone sleeps, eats, and lives together. Can you read it? Agnes asks. Like most women, and most men for that matter, she never learned to read. You squint at the careful script. Your own literacy is basic at best, learned from the parish priest in exchange for barrels to store the church's communion wine. It's from Geoffrey, you say, meaning your brother. He says, you trace the words slowly. The wine merchant is expanding, needs more barrels, good ones for the fancy wine. Wants to know if I can make 30 by Michaelmas. Agnes's eyes widen. 30? That's a lot of money, you finish. Enough to maybe buy a bigger workshop, maybe even take on another apprentice properly, maybe even afford better wine so you don't feel like death warmed over every morning. I told you, Richard says triumphantly, I told you that Noble liked your work. He must have told the London merchants. The hungover fog clears from your mind a bit. A few months ago, you had indeed made several barrels for a passing nobleman. He'd paid well and promised to recommend you, but people promise a lot of things after a few cups of wine. We need to celebrate, Richard exclaims. No, you and Agnes say simultaneously. But this is good fortune. We should give thanks at church, he amends quickly. Agnes nods approvingly. Yes, we should, and then your master needs to stay away from the taverns for a few nights if he's going to make 30 barrels by Michaelmas. Church bells ring again, signalling the advancing morning. You need to get to work, hangover or not. But as you gather your tools, you can't help thinking about tonight, when the taverns will fill again with people seeking a brief escape from their hard lives. The ale will flow, the stories will get taller, the songs bawdier. There will be fights and friendships, deals and deceptions. Someone might die, someone might fall in love, someone might change their fortune with a chance meeting. And tomorrow morning it will all begin again. The cycle of medieval life, where the tavern stands as a refuge, a danger, and the beating heart of the community. You look up at the watery sun breaking through the clouds. There's work to be done, a tax collector to bribe, and 30 barrels to plan. But tonight, the taverns will call again, as they always do. And somewhere across town, in the back room of the Boar's Head, a young nobleman is just waking up to discover his fine clothes and purse are gone, replaced with someone else's shabby tunic, and a world of trouble waiting for him outside. Medieval nights out, my friends. They were wild, they were dangerous, and for most people, they were the only entertainment they'd ever know. By midday, your hangover has mostly subsided. The pounding in your head has reduced to a dull throb thanks to Agnes's herbal tea, a bitter concoction that tastes like dirt but somehow works. Your workshop smells of fresh-cut oak and wood shavings, a pleasant change from the stale beer stench you woke up in. You've been working on the first barrel for the London order when a shadow darkens your doorway. It's William the tax collector, right on schedule. His thin frame and pinched face remind you of a weasel. "Master Cooper," he says with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "I hear business is booming. Royal barrels. Is it now?" Richard, who's been sanding wood nearby, suddenly becomes very interested in a knot in the floor. "Just a drunken boast," you admit. "Though I do have a large order from London." William's eyebrows shoot up. "London? Well, that certainly sounds like a man whose taxes might need reassessing. This is how it goes. Success makes you a target. Wealth has to be carefully hidden in medieval society, or someone will take it, either legally through taxes or illegally through theft. Perhaps we could discuss it over a drink," you suggest, nodding toward the small cask of French wine you've already set aside. Bribery isn't just common, it's expected. William's eyes light up. "A reasonable man, I've always said you were a reasonable man." An hour later, William leaves with a small flask of wine tucked into his coat and a promise to forget about your supposed royal connections. You've lost some good wine, but saved yourself a hefty tax hike. A fair trade in medieval economics. "Is he gone?" Agnes asks, poking her head in from your adjoining home. "Yes, and he won't be back until quarter day," you confirm. She steps fully into the workshop, carrying a basket. "Good. I'm going to the market. Do you need anything?" "Some willow bark, if the herb woman is there," you say, touching your temple, "and maybe see if anyone's heard about Martin the Chandler." Agnes nods grimly. "I'll ask around." After she leaves, you turn to Richard. "Let's finish up here, then head to the prancing pony. I need to pay for that chair, and I want to hear what people are saying about the missing Chandler." Richard grins. He's only 16 and loves any excuse to visit a tavern, even during daylight hours. You work for another hour, completing the base of one barrel and starting on another. It's honest work, requiring skill and precision. The 30-barrel order will keep you busy for weeks, but the payment will be worth it. Maybe you'll even be able to afford a real doctor if anyone falls ill, instead of relying on the local wise woman and her questionable cures. "Master, look," Richard suddenly calls from the doorway where he's been sweeping. "It's him, the nobleman from this morning." You rush over, curiosity overcoming your usual caution. Sure enough, the young man you saw stumbling out of the crusty loaf is walking purposefully down the street. He's still wearing the shabby clothes from this morning, but he's carrying himself differently. Shoulders back, chin up. The walk of someone used to being respected. "He's coming this way," Richard whispers. "Back to work," you hiss, pushing him toward the barrels. "Don't stare." The nobleman pauses outside your workshop, then steps inside without invitation. That's privilege for you. No one would dare stop him. "Are you the cooper?" he asks, his accent marking him as educated, probably university trained. You bow slightly. "I am, my lord." "I am not my lord," he corrects, looking annoyed. "I am Master James Harrington, son of Lord Pembroke." You bow again, deeper this time. "My apologies, Master Harrington. How may I serve you?" He looks around your workshop, taking in the barrels in various stages of completion. "I find myself in an unusual situation. I require discreet assistance." "Oh boy, this could be good for business or very, very bad for your health. Nobles' problems have a way of becoming everyone else's problems, usually with more dire consequences the further down the social ladder you go. "I was robbed last night," he says bluntly. "My clothes, my purse, even my signet ring. I woke dressed as this." He gestures to his plain clothing with disgust. "That's terrible, sir," you say carefully. "Have you informed the constable?" James laughs bitterly. "And admit I was drunk in a common tavern. My father would disown me. No, I need to resolve this quietly." You glance at Richard, who's pretending to work while clearly eavesdropping. "How can a humble cooper help, sir?" "I need to find who did this before nightfall," James says. "The tavern keeper claims to know nothing, but someone there must have seen something. I thought perhaps a local man might have better luck asking questions than a nobleman's son." Translation: he needs someone expendable to do his dirty work. "What's in it for me?" you ask, then quickly add, "Sir." James narrows his eyes, not used to being questioned. 5 shillings now, 5 more when you find my belongings. 10 shillings, the exact amount the widow Simmons offered for her son's apprenticeship. Coincidence? Or is fate giving you a nudge? "Deal," you say, holding out your hand before remembering yourself. Nobles don't shake hands with craftsmen. You awkwardly lower it. James doesn't notice your faux pas. He's already pulling out a small pouch from his boot, a clever hiding place even the most thorough thief might miss. "Start at the crusty loaf," he instructs, handing you 5 shillings. "I was there most of the evening. Then I believe I went to the Boar's Head." My memory grows hazy after that. "No kidding. You were at both those taverns last night too, and you don't remember seeing any nobleman. Though by the end of the night, you probably wouldn't have noticed if the king himself was dancing on the tables." "I'll need a description of your belongings," you say. As James describes his fine wool cloak, leather boots with silver buckles and gold signet ring bearing his family crest, you can't help thinking about how much those items are worth. More than you'll earn in a year, more than enough for someone to kill over. "I'll do my best, sir," you promise. "Where can I find you when I have news?" "I'm staying at St. Catherine's Monastery until this is resolved," he says. "Ask for the guest quarters." Smart move. Monasteries offer comfortable lodging for the wealthy, and no one will question a nobleman's son seeking spiritual guidance for a day or two. After James leaves, Richard explodes with excitement. 10 shillings, that's a fortune, and we get to investigate a robbery. "Keep your voice down," you warn. "This could be dangerous. Someone bold enough to rob a nobleman might not hesitate to silence witnesses." Richard's face falls slightly, but his eyes still gleam with adventure. So what's the plan? You consider your options. First, we need to finish today's work, then we'll visit the prancing pony, pay for that chair and ask some careful questions. After that, the crusty loaf and the boar's head. What about the chandler? Shouldn't we ask about him too? You nod. We'll keep our ears open. People love to gossip, especially at taverns. Across town, in a large stone house near the cathedral, merchant Edmund Blackwell is also preparing for evening activities. But unlike your modest plans to visit ale houses, Edmund is readying himself for a much more refined establishment. The merchant adjusts his deep blue wool coat, imported from Florence at great expense. His wife, Isabella, fusses with his collar. "The blue makes your eyes stand out," she says approvingly. "Remember to mention the spice shipment to Master Phillips. His wife loves cinnamon." Edmund nods. "And the silk for the mayor's daughter's wedding? Has it arrived?" "This morning. I've already sent word to their household." This is how business works among the merchant class. Formal contracts exist, but most deals are still made face-to-face, often over wine in taverns catering to the wealthier residents. The Gilded Cup is Edmund's destination tonight, an upscale establishment where the wine comes from France and Italy, not the local vineyards, and where the cups are actually gilded around the rims. "Will Lady Anne be there?" Edmund asks casually, too casually. Isabella gives him a sharp look. "I believe she's still in mourning for her husband." "It's been 6 months," Edmund points out. "And she's a wealthy widow now," Isabella adds pointedly. "Don't think I don't know what goes on at these business meetings of yours." Edmund laughs and kisses his wife's cheek. "You know you're the only one for me." She rolls her eyes, but smiles. "Just remember, Lord Phillips controls the northern shipping routes. Be charming, but not too charming to his wife." This is the reality of medieval business. Politics, marriages, and alliances all intertwined. A merchant like Edmund lives or dies by his connections and reputation. "I won't be late," he promises, reaching for his walking stick with its silver handle. Another status symbol in a world where appearances matter immensely. "You said that last week," Isabella reminds him. "Then you came home at dawn smelling like wine and perfume that wasn't mine." "That was different. We were celebrating the Sussex contract." She clearly doesn't believe him. "Well, try to celebrate with your clothes on this time. The laundress asked about the lipstick on your collar. Medieval marriages, especially among the wealthy, are often practical arrangements. Fidelity is appreciated but not always expected, particularly for men. Still, discretion is essential to maintain social standing." Edmund kisses his wife goodbye and steps out into the afternoon sun. His house is in the better part of town, where the streets are wider and some even have crude cobblestones instead of packed dirt. He nods to his neighbours, another merchant, a physician, and a minor church official. This is his world, separate from the ale houses where craftsmen and labourers drink. The Gilded Cup won't be busy for hours yet, but Edmund likes to arrive early to secure the best table and observe who comes and goes. Information is as valuable as any cargo in his ships. In yet another part of town, preparations of a different sort are taking place. At the Boar's Head, the tavern keeper's wife, the same woman who dumped water on your feet this morning, is directing the evening's preparations. "More straw on the floor," she barks at a serving boy. "Last night's is soaked through with, well, best not to think about it." The boy hurries to spread fresh straw, the medieval equivalent of a floor cleaning. It does little for the smell, but at least soaks up spilled drinks and worse. The tavern keeper himself, a burly man named Walter, is in the cellar, tapping a new barrel of ale. His daughter Eliza is slicing bread and cheese into portions to sell alongside the drinks. Nothing fancy, just enough to absorb some of the alcohol and keep patrons drinking longer. "Father," Eliza says casually, "did you notice if Martin the chandler was here last night? His wife's been asking after him." Walter grunts. "Might have been. It was busy. Ask Tom. He was serving most of the night." Tom, a lanky young man who works as a server, looks up from where he's arranging tankards. "The chandler? Yeah, he was here. Got into an argument with a stranger. Big fellow with a scar on his cheek. Never seen him before." "What were they fighting about?" Eliza asks. Tom shrugs. "Couldn't hear." But they both left together around curfew. Thought it was odd, them settling their differences so quick. Walter and his wife exchange glances. People who disappear after tavern arguments often turn up in ditches or the river. Best not to know too much. "If anyone asks," Walter says firmly, "Martin left alone. We don't need that kind of trouble here. This is the dark side of medieval nightlife. Violence is common, justice is rare, and minding your own business is often the wisest course." The tavern keeper's wife changes the subject. "Did you water down the ale like I told you?" "Just the first few rounds," Walter confirms. "Once they're drunk, they can't tell the difference anyway." "And the wine?" she presses. "Got some cheap stuff to serve if anyone asks to check the cask first. Keep the decent wine hidden for those who don't know better." These are the tricks of the trade. Medieval consumer protection doesn't exist, and taverns can get away with all sorts of deception as long as they don't cross the wrong people. "What about him?" Tom nods toward the back room, "your former sleeping spot." "The cooper?" Walter's wife scoffs. "He's harmless, drinks too much and sings badly. Probably be back tonight with that apprentice of his mooning over Eliza." Eliza blushes. "Richard doesn't moon over me, mother." "Course he does. Boy's got eyes, doesn't he?" Taverns aren't just places to drink. They're where young people meet, where romances bloom and fade, often in the same night. For many young women like Eliza, marriage to a promising craftsman like Richard could be a step up in the world. "Just don't encourage him too much," Walter warns his daughter. "I don't need a lovesick apprentice causing trouble. Besides, his master owes me money for that bench he broke last week." As the afternoon wears on, the lowest ranks of society are also preparing for evening entertainment, albeit with far fewer options. In the fields outside town, farm labourers are finishing their day's work. "Drink tonight?" one asks another as they stack hay. "Can't afford it," his friend replies, "unless you're buying." "Split a jug at Old Mary's," suggests a third. "Cheaper than the taverns, and she doesn't water it down as much." Old Mary runs what you might call a medieval speakeasy from her cottage on the edge of town. She brews ale in her back room and serves it for halfpenny a cup, less than half what the licensed taverns charge. It's illegal, of course, but the authorities generally look the other way, as long as she pays her informal taxes to the local constable. For the poorest workers, places like Old Mary's are the only affordable option for drinking. No fancy wine, no music, just cheap ale and a bench to sit on. "Heard there's a cockfight behind the tannery," the first labourer says. "Could win some coin there, or lose what little we have," the second points out. "Either way, we drink," says the third with a laugh. Life is hard for these men. Back-breaking labour from dawn to dusk, poor food, poorer housing, a cup of ale and the companionship of friends is often the only pleasure they can afford. Is it any wonder they seize it whenever possible? Back at your workshop, you finish the day's work on the barrels. The sun is starting to lower in the sky and your thoughts turn to your evening plans. "Ready?" you ask Richard, who's been fidgeting impatiently for the past hour. "Born ready," he replies with a grin. You roll your eyes at his enthusiasm. "Remember, we're looking for information, not trouble. Keep your voice down, your ears open, and don't drink more than 1 cup." "Yes, master," he says, attempting to look serious and failing miserably. You lock up the workshop, a simple wooden bar across the door, not that it would stop a determined thief, and head toward the prancing pony to settle your debt for the broken chair. As you walk, you notice how the town is changing as day shifts toward evening. Shops are closing, shutters coming down over windows. The market square is emptying of legitimate vendors and attracting a different sort of crowd, people who prefer to conduct their business in shadows. Church bells ring for evening prayers. Some people hurry toward the church, others deliberately turn away. The medieval relationship with religion is complicated, fear of damnation balanced against the very human desire for pleasure. "Master," Richard says, suddenly grabbing your arm, "look there." You follow his gaze to a side street where 2 men are engaged in what appears to be an intense conversation. One is tall with a distinctive scar on his cheek. The other has his back to you, but something about his clothes seems familiar. "That's the man Tom mentioned," Richard whispers. "The one who left with Martin the Chandler." Your skin prickles with unease. The scarred man certainly looks capable of violence, but the second man, is that a fine cloak he's wearing, the kind a nobleman might own? Before you can get a better look, they turn down another street and disappear from view. "Should we follow them?" Richard asks eagerly. You consider it. On one hand, you're curious about both the missing Chandler and the nobleman's stolen belongings. On the other hand, getting involved in other people's dangerous business is a good way to end up missing yourself. No, you decide reluctantly. We stick to the plan, the pony first, then the crusty loaf. Richard looks disappointed but doesn't argue. As your apprentice, he's obliged to obey you, at least in theory. The prancing pony comes into view ahead. Unlike this morning when it was quiet and nearly empty, the tavern is now showing signs of life. The door stands open, lanterns are being lit inside, and you can hear voices and laughter already. Another night in medieval England is about to begin, with all its dangers and delights, and you're walking straight into the middle of it, whether wisdom suggests you should or not. The prancing pony is already buzzing with early evening activity when you push open the door. The familiar smell of ale, sweat and wood smoke wraps around you like an old blanket. Unpleasant, but somehow comforting in its familiarity. A far cry from your clean, comfortable bed right now. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," calls the barmaid, a plump, red-faced woman named Mary who's been serving drinks here since before you were born. "Come to pay for my chair, have you?" You nod sheepishly and make your way to the bar, which is really just a plank of wood laid across 2 barrels. Richard follows close behind, eyes wide as he takes in the tavern's early evening crowd. "6 pence," Mary says firmly, holding out her hand. You dig into your pouch and pay her, adding an extra penny as a peace offering. "Sorry about that. Don't remember much about last night?" "Not surprised," she snorts. "You were singing that song about the bishop and the milkmaid. Lucky there weren't any church folk here." Your face heats up. "You really need to work on your drinking habits. Actually," you say, lowering your voice, "I'm looking for some information." Mary raises an eyebrow. "Information costs extra." You slide another penny across the bar. Medieval Google isn't cheap. "Did you see a young nobleman in here last night? Well-dressed, educated speech?" Mary thinks for a moment. "Can't say I did. We don't get many nobles here. They prefer the gilded cup or the king's arms." She leans closer. "Why? You in trouble with the quality?" "Not me," you assure her. "I've been hired to find something that went missing." Her eyes narrow. "You playing constable now?" That's dangerous work. Just asking questions. Oh, and what about Martin the Chandler? Seen him lately? A shadow crosses Mary's face. Not since last night. He was in here early, then went to the Boar's Head. She lowers her voice. There's talk he never made it home. Any idea who he was with? Mary glances around and leans closer. Stranger, big fellow with a scar. Bad business if you ask me. The same man you spotted in the street earlier. This can't be a coincidence. Thanks, Mary. One more thing. Anyone trying to sell fine clothes or a signet ring today? She gives you a sharp look. You asking for yourself or for the law? For 10 shillings, you admit. Mary nods, understanding the motivation. Try Ned the peddler. He deals in found items, usually drinks at the Crusty Loaf this time of evening. Richard tugs at your sleeve. Master, look who just came in. You turn to see William the tax collector entering the tavern. Didn't you just bribe him this morning? What's he doing here? Evening, William, you call, figuring it's better to acknowledge him than pretend you haven't seen him. Drink? He looks startled to see you, then recovers. Cooper, yes, a drink would be welcome. Mary pours 3 cups of ale, giving you a questioning look. You nod. You're paying. Money is flowing out of your pouch like water today. What brings you here so early? You ask William casually. He glances around before answering. Official business. Tax office sends their regards. That's odd. The tax office doesn't usually do evening collections. Something's off. Anything I should know about? You probe. William takes a long drink before answering. Just routine, though there are rumours of counterfeit coins circulating. The king takes a dim view of that. Counterfeiting is serious business, as in they cut off your hands then execute you serious. Medieval monetary policy doesn't mess around. Haven't seen any, you say truthfully. Good. William drains his cup with surprising speed. Well, must be off. More visits to make. After he leaves, Mary leans across the bar. He wasn't here on tax business, she says flatly. How do you know? Because he was meeting with that stranger. The scarred one. Saw them here yesterday whispering in the corner like conspirators. The plot thickens, as they say. A tax collector, a scarred stranger, a missing chandler, and a robbed nobleman, all somehow connected. We should get to the Crusty Loaf, you tell Richard. Find this peddler Ned before he drinks himself useless. Richard nods eagerly, but as you turn to leave, the door bursts open again. This time it's Agnes, your wife, looking flustered. There you are, she exclaims, and I've been looking everywhere. What's wrong? You ask, immediately concerned. Agnes rarely enters taverns. It's Martin, she says. They found him. Your stomach tightens. Where? Floating in the mill pond, she says grimly. Throat cut. The tavern goes quiet as people overhear. Then the murmuring starts, the medieval rumour mill cranking into high gear. Did you hear? The chandler's dead, murdered. Who would do such a thing? It spreads like wildfire, which, in a medieval town built of wood and thatch, is a very real and terrifying comparison. We should go, you mutter to Richard. Murder makes everything complicated, and you suddenly want no part of this mystery. But Agnes grabs your arm. There's more. They found fine clothes and a gold ring in his possession. The constable is asking questions. Oh, hell. The nobleman's stolen goods in the hands of a murdered man? This just got a whole lot more dangerous. Did they find a cloak? Boots with silver buckles? You ask quietly. Agnes gives you an odd look. How did you know? Lucky guess, you lie. Let's get out of here. The three of you exit the prancing pony just as the church bells ring 6 o'clock. The streets are filling with evening activity now, shopkeepers heading home, labourers seeking entertainment, women hurrying to finish errands before full dark makes the roads unsafe. "Why are you asking about Martin and fancy clothes?" Agnes demands once you're outside. You quickly explain about the nobleman's commission. Richard, bless him, adds unnecessary dramatic flourishes about solving the crime and bringing justice. Agnes is not impressed. "So you're sticking your nose into a murder investigation for 10 shillings? Have you lost your mind?" Put that way, it does sound rather stupid. "I just need to tell Master Harrington what happened to his belongings," you argue. "Then I'm done with it." "And collect your other 5 shillings, Agnes adds dryly. "Well, yes, that too." She sighs the deep sigh of a medieval wife who's seen her husband make questionable decisions before. "Fine, but you're taking me with you. Someone needs to keep you out of trouble." Richard beams. "Like a proper investigation team." Agnes and you both ignore this. "We should go to St. Catherine's Monastery," you decide. "Tell Master Harrington what's happened before he hears it from someone else." And before the constable starts wondering why the stolen goods were found on Martin, Agnes points out sensibly, she's right. In medieval justice, being connected to a crime, even tangentially, can be dangerous. Best to establish your legitimate involvement early. The monastery sits on a hill overlooking the town, its stone walls glowing golden in the evening sun. Unlike the cramped, noisy streets below, the monastery grounds are peaceful and orderly. Monks in brown robes move quietly between buildings, while a few wealthy visitors stroll the gardens. You approach the gatehouse, suddenly aware of your working clothes and the wood shavings still clinging to your hair. The monk at the gate regards you suspiciously. "We're here to see Master James Harrington," you explain. "He's expecting us." The monk looks sceptical, but another figure appears behind him, a young novice with bright eyes. "I know Master Harrington," the novice says. "I'll take them." As you follow him across the courtyard, Agnes whispers, "How does a monastery novice know a nobleman's son?" You shrug. The church connects all levels of society in strange ways. The guest quarters are in a separate building, far more luxurious than the monk's Spartan cells. The novice leads you to a door, knocks softly, and announces, "Visitors for Master Harrington." The door opens to reveal James, still in his borrowed commoner's clothes, but looking considerably more composed than this morning. "The Cooper," he says, sounding surprised. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." "There have been developments," you say carefully, aware of the novice hovering nearby. "Might we speak privately?" James dismisses the novice and ushers you into his chamber. It's a simple room by noble standards, but far nicer than your home. A real bed with linen sheets, a writing desk, a window with actual glass instead of oiled paper. "Who are these people?" James asks, gesturing to Agnes and Richard. "My wife and apprentice," you explain. "They're trustworthy." James doesn't look convinced, but he motions for you to continue. "Your belongings have been found," you tell him, "but there's a complication." As you explain about Martin the Chandler's death and the discovery of the stolen items, James's face grows increasingly pale. "Murder!" he whispers. "And they found my ring on him? And your clothes," Agnes adds. "The constable has them now." James paces the small room. "This is a disaster. I need those items back, especially the ring. It bears my family crest. If word gets to my father that I lost it in a common tavern..." "There's more," you say. "The man was seen arguing with a stranger last night, tall with a scar on his cheek. And this same stranger has been meeting with William the tax collector." "What does a tax collector have to do with this?" James demands. You shrug. "Unknown, but it seems like more than coincidence." James stops pacing. "I need that ring back, tonight, without my family finding out." "The constable has it now," Agnes points out. "You'll have to explain why it was in a dead man's possession." "I can say it was stolen," James argues. "That's true enough." "And what were you doing in a common tavern where you might be robbed?" you counter. James flushes. "That's not the constable's business." Agnes steps forward. "Forgive my boldness, sir, but perhaps honesty would serve you best here. A man is dead. If you were the last to see him alive—" "I wasn't," James snaps. "I never met this Chandler I was drinking, yes, but I remember nothing after the crusty loaf. I woke up in the Boar's Head, missing my belongings." You exchange glances with Agnes. Claiming a blackout from drinking might save James's pride, but it doesn't help solve the mystery. "Maybe we should retrace your steps," Richard suggests. "Go to the crusty loaf, see if anyone remembers who you were with." It's actually a sensible suggestion. You nod approvingly at your apprentice. "I can hardly walk into a common tavern now," James protests. "Not with a murdered man found with my ring?" "You're already dressed for it," Agnes points out, gesturing to his borrowed clothes. James looks down at himself and grimaces. "I suppose I am." "We'll go with you," you offer. "Safety in numbers. What you don't say is that you're still hoping to earn those remaining 5 shillings. A murder complicates things, but it doesn't change the fact that you found his belongings, technically completing the job." "Very well," James agrees reluctantly, "but we must be discreet." The crusty loaf is significantly less reputable than the Prancing Pony. Located near the tanneries, which explains the perpetual smell, it caters to a rougher crowd: labourers, dock workers, and those who prefer not to answer questions about their occupations. The 4 of you pause outside its low doorway. Music and loud voices spill out into the street, along with the yellow glow of tallow candles, the cheap, smelly kind made from animal fat rather than beeswax. "Charming," James mutters. "Stay close," you advise, "and let me do the talking." Inside, the crusty loaf is already packed despite the relatively early hour. The ceiling is low, blackened with years of smoke, and the floor is bare earth covered with rushes that look like they haven't been changed in months. The smell is challenging. "How do people breathe in here?" James whispers, pressing a handkerchief to his nose. "Through their mouths," you reply. "Come on." You push your way toward the bar, keeping Agnes and the others close behind you. The tavern keeper, a huge man with massive arms and a missing ear, regards you suspiciously. "What'll it be?" he grunts. "4 ales, you say, placing coins on the sticky wooden surface. "And some information, if you're selling." His single eyebrow raises. "Depends on what you're buying." You slide another coin across. "Looking for Ned the peddler?" The tavern keeper jerks his head toward the back corner. "Over there, been waiting for someone all evening." You collect your drinks, served in chipped earthenware mugs that look like they've never been washed, and make your way to the indicated corner. Ned the peddler is a skinny, rat-faced man with darting eyes and fingers that never stop moving. He looks up as you approach, suspicious until he recognizes you. "Cooper," he acknowledges, "don't usually see you in here." "Oh, special occasion," you say, sitting down across from him. Your companions crowd onto the bench beside you. Ned's eyes flick over them, lingering curiously on James. Despite the common clothes, James's posture and clean fingernails mark him as someone who doesn't belong. "Mary at the Pony said you might have come across some interesting items recently," you say casually, sliding another coin toward him. Ned pockets it smoothly. "Maybe." What sort of items? Fine clothes, a signet ring, gentleman's boots. Ned's face gives nothing away, but his fingers twitch. Popular items these days. Funny you should ask. Oh? Someone else was asking earlier. Big fellow, scar on his cheek. You feel James stiffen beside you. What did you tell him, you ask? Ned shrugs. Same thing, I'll tell you. I don't have those items. Never did. But you know who does? Agnes presses. Ned's eyes narrow at her intrusion into men's business, but he answers. New, past tense, considering he's currently decorating the mill pond. Martin the Chandler, you say flatly. Ned nods. Got them from a girl who works at the Boar's Head, Eliza, the keeper's daughter. She found our fancy friend here, he nods at James. Passed out in the back room, helped herself to his things. James half rises in indignation, but you pull him back down. So Martin bought the stolen goods from Eliza, you clarify. For a good price too, was planning to sell them out of town next market day. Ned takes a swig of his ale. Guess that plan's gone to hell now. Did Martin know who the items belong to? Agnes asks. Ned shrugs. Doubt it. Girl probably didn't mention it. Safer that way. And the scarred man, you press. What's his interest? No idea, but he seemed mighty keen, offered real silver for information. Ned gives you a pointed look, more than you're offering. You're about to respond when a commotion at the door draws everyone's attention. 3 men in the constable's livery are pushing their way into the tavern. The music stops abruptly. We're looking for information about Martin the Chandler, the lead constable announces. Anyone who was with him last night, step forward now. The tavern falls deathly silent. Medieval law enforcement isn't known for its gentle questioning techniques. Back door, Ned mutters, already sliding off his bench. Now. You don't need to be told twice. The last thing you want is to be questioned by the constable about a murder victim while sitting next to the owner of the stolen goods found on the body. That's the kind of coincidence that gets people tortured for confessions. The 4 of you follow Ned through the kitchen, dodging a surprised cook, and out into a narrow alley behind the tavern. The evening air, despite the nearby tannery, feels fresh and clean after the tavern's miasma. What now? James demands, looking shaken. Now we visit the Boar's Head, you decide. Have a word with young Eliza. Ned is already melting into the shadows. You didn't hear it from me, he calls softly before disappearing. Richard looks excited. This is better than a mystery play, real murder, stolen goods, constables. Agnes cuffs him gently on the ear. This isn't entertainment, boy. A man is dead, and I'm still missing my ring, James adds grimly. Let's go find this thieving girl. As you make your way through darkening streets toward the Boar's Head, you can't help wondering how a simple commission turned into such a tangled mess. You were just supposed to find some stolen items, collect your payment, and go home. Instead, you're investigating a murder, dodging constables, and dragging your wife and apprentice into danger, all for 5 shillings. The evening's barely started, and already it's proving to be one of the more eventful nights of your life. Medieval entertainment, indeed. The Boar's Head is in full swing by the time you arrive. Unlike the relative quiet of your morning visit, the tavern is now packed with bodies. The air thick with smoke, sweat, and the yeasty smell of ale. A man in the corner is playing a crude fiddle while another beats a small drum, the music barely audible over the roar of conversation and laughter. Is it always this crowded? James asks, looking uncomfortable as a large man bumps into him without apologising. This is nothing, you tell him. Wait until midnight. The four of you push your way toward the bar, where Walter the tavern keeper is pouring ale as fast as his arms can move. His wife is collecting money, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Cooper," she calls when she spots you. "Back for more punishment, and you've brought friends." You force a smile. "Just thirsty. Seen Eliza about?" Her eyes narrow slightly. "What do you want with my daughter?" "Just a question about a patron from last night," you say casually. "She's busy, serving the back tables." You nod and order 4 ales, which she serves with a suspicious look. As you pay, you ask, "Heard about Martin the Chandler?" The tavern keeper's wife doesn't flinch. "Terrible business. Wife's beside herself, I hear." "They're saying he was last seen leaving here," you press. "Lots of people leave here," she replies flatly. "Can't keep track of them all." Her defensive tone tells you she knows more than she's saying. You decide not to push it, yet you lead your group toward the back tables, where Eliza is indeed serving drinks. She's pretty in a rough-edged way, her cheeks flushed from the heat and exertion. When she sees Richard, she smiles briefly before noticing the rest of your party. "Master Cooper," she greets you, and others. Her eyes linger on James, a flicker of recognition crossing her face before she masks it. "Got a moment?" you ask. "I'm working," she says, hefting a tray of empty mugs. "It's about the gentleman who slept in your back room last night," Agnes says bluntly. "The one who lost his belongings." Eliza's face goes carefully blank. "Lots of drunks sleep it off back there. Can't remember them all." "This one would stand out," James says quietly. "He wasn't your usual patron." Eliza's eyes dart between your faces, calculating her options. Medieval women, especially working-class ones like her, learn early to judge which situations might turn dangerous. "Let me drop these off," she says finally, nodding to her tray. "Meet me by the back door in 5 minutes. Not all at once. Don't want to draw attention." Smart girl. You nod and watch her disappear into the crowd. "I'll go first," Agnes decides. She might be more forthcoming with another woman. As Agnes slips away toward the back, you, James and Richard find an empty corner to wait. The tavern is growing louder as more patrons arrive. You recognize some faces. The blacksmith, a couple of weavers, the miller's sons. Working men, mostly, with a few women among them. "This is how the common folk live?" James asks, looking around with undisguised curiosity. "It's so crowded." "Not everyone has a monastery guest chamber," you remind him dryly. He has the grace to look embarrassed. "I didn't mean, it's just different." Richard, who's been watching the room, suddenly stiffens. "Master, look by the door." You follow his gaze to see William the tax collector entering the tavern again, and beside him, looking dangerous in the flickering candlelight, is the scarred man. "We should get to the back door," you mutter. "Now." You lead James and Richard through the crush of bodies, narrowly avoiding a barmaid carrying a pitcher of ale. The back of the tavern is marginally quieter, with a narrow corridor leading to the kitchen and storerooms. Agnes is already there with Eliza, their heads close together in conversation. They both look up as you approach. "She's agreed to talk," Agnes informs you, "but not here." Eliza nods. "My break is in 10 minutes. Meet me at the old chapel ruins behind the tannery." "Is that safe?" James asks. Eliza gives him a long look. "Safer than talking here with him watching." She nods discreetly toward the main room, where the scarred man is now visibly scanning the crowd. "Who is he?" you ask. "Don't know his name, but he's been asking questions about your noble friend here." She looks directly at James. "And about your missing ring." James starts. "How did you..." "I've served drinks to lords before," she cuts him off. "Your accent, your hands, the way you stand, might as well have nobleman painted on your forehead." You have to admire her perception. Despite James's commoner disguise, Eliza spotted him immediately for what he was. 10 minutes, she repeats. "Now go before you're seen talking to me." You lead your group back through the crowded main room, careful to avoid William and the scarred man. Outside, the night air is cool after the tavern's stifling heat. Stars are emerging in the darkening sky, and the last church bells are ringing for the day. "The old chapel ruins," Agnes muses. "Not the most reassuring meeting place." "Especially in the dark," Richard adds with a slight tremor in his voice. His earlier excitement about investigating seems to be fading as the reality of nighttime dangers sets in. "We need that information," James insists, "and I want to know exactly what happened to my belongings." "And maybe learn who killed Martin," you add grimly. The four of you make your way through darkening streets toward the old chapel ruins. Once a small shrine outside the town walls, it was abandoned after a fire decades ago. Now it's just a shell of stone walls overtaken by ivy, a place where lovers sometimes meet and children dare each other to enter at night. "Stay close," you warn as you approach the ruins. "And Richard, keep your voice down." The ruins loom before you, jagged walls creating strange shadows in the moonlight. You hesitate at what was once the doorway, suddenly aware of how perfect this setting would be for an ambush. "Hello?" you call softly. "Over here?" Eliza's voice comes from inside. You enter cautiously. Agnes and Richard close behind, James bringing up the rear. Your eyes adjust to see Eliza sitting on a fallen stone, a small lantern beside her casting just enough light to see by. "Were you followed?" she asks immediately. "I don't think so," you reply, though you can't be certain. "Good." She looks at James directly. "You were robbed. I know because I did it." James surges forward. "You little." Agnes grabs his arm. "Let her talk." Eliza doesn't flinch. "You passed out in our back room, dead drunk. Had a purse full of silver and fine clothes that would fetch a good price." "So you just took them?" James demands. She shrugs. "You're noble. You can get more. People like me can't." It's a harsh reality of medieval economics, the vast wealth gap between classes and the desperation it breeds. "What happened to my things after you took them?" James asks, visibly struggling to control his temper. "Sold the clothes and boots to Martin the chandler. He was going to take them to the next town's market." Eliza hesitates. "But I kept the ring, thought it might be worth more to the right buyer." "Where is it now?" James presses. "Hidden. After I heard about Martin, I got scared. That ring has a family crest, too recognizable." You lean forward. "What happened to Martin, Eliza?" She shakes her head. "I don't know for certain, but he left with that scarred man last night. The one who's been asking questions." "And you think the scarred man killed him?" Agnes asks. "Makes sense, doesn't it? Martin had stolen goods. Maybe the scarred man wanted them." James runs a hand through his hair in frustration. "But who is this man? Why is he working with the tax collector? None of this makes sense." Eliza picks at her nails nervously. "There's something else. I overheard them talking, William and the scarred man. They mentioned counterfeit coins." Your blood chills. That matches what William told you earlier about counterfeit currency circulating. "What exactly did they say?" you press. "Something about moving the operation, and the chandler knows too much." This was yesterday afternoon. The pieces start to click together in your mind. So Martin somehow discovered a counterfeiting operation involving William and this scarred stranger. They killed him to keep him quiet, then discovered he had your stolen goods. You look at James. "They've been looking for the ring specifically. But why?" Richard wonders. Because, James says slowly, my ring bears my family's crest. If counterfeit coins were linked to it somehow, they could implicate your family in the counterfeiting, Agnes finishes. A perfect scapegoat. It's a clever plan. Counterfeiting is treason, punishable by death. If evidence pointed to a nobleman's family, it would create a scandal big enough to distract from any further investigation. I need that ring, James says urgently to Eliza. Now. She hesitates. It's not here. It's hidden in... A twig snaps outside the ruins. Everyone freezes. Someone's coming, Richard whispers. Eliza quickly douses her lantern. This way, she mouths, gesturing toward a low gap in the wall that might once have been a window. The five of you crouch down, listening as footsteps approach the ruins. There's the soft glow of another lantern, and then voices. William the tax collector and the scarred man. She's not here, the scarred man says, his voice a deep growl. Your information was wrong. The tavern boy said she came this way, William protests, his voice higher and nervous. Said she was meeting someone. The ring wasn't in the Chandler's possessions, the scarred man continues. The girl must have it. Without it, the whole plan falls apart. We still have the dies and stamps, William argues. We can make more coins. And when they trace them back to us? No, we need the ring. A noble family taking the blame is our insurance. They move deeper into the ruins, their lantern lights sweeping dangerously close to your hiding spot. Eliza tugs your sleeve, pointing to the window gap. One by one, you slip through it, dropping to the soft ground outside. Run, Eliza whispers once you're all through. Meet me at the north gate in 1 hour. She doesn't wait for a response, darting away into the darkness. The rest of you follow her example, fleeing in the opposite direction until you're safely away from the ruins. Well, Agnes says when you finally stop running, all of you breathing hard, at least now we know what's happening? Counterfeiting ring, you gasp, with William involved. And they killed Martin when he found out, Richard adds. James looks grim. And they want my ring to frame my family for the crime. We should go to the constable, Agnes suggests. With what proof, you counter. The word of a tavern girl who admits to stealing from a nobleman, our overheard snippet of conversation? We need more. We need the ring, James insists. If we can secure it, then go to the authorities. Eliza said to meet her at the north gate in an hour, Richard reminds you. You nod. That gives us time to think, and to see what's happening at the Gilded Cup. The Gilded Cup? Agnes questions. Why there? William mentioned dies and stamps, tools for making counterfeit coins. They must be keeping them somewhere. The Gilded Cup caters to merchants and officials, people who handle large sums of money. Perfect cover for introducing counterfeit coins. James looks thoughtful. It makes sense, and it's a place where a tax collector wouldn't raise suspicions. But we can't just walk in, Agnes points out. Not dressed like this. She's right. The Gilded Cup is for wealthy patrons. Your working clothes would stand out immediately. I could go alone, James suggests. I may be dressed poorly, but my speech and manners would get me in the door. And if William or the scarred man is there, you ask? James frowns. Good point. What about the back entrance? Richard suggests. Service door. Every tavern has one for deliveries. You clap him on the shoulder. Good thinking. We could at least get a look inside, see if there's anything suspicious. This is madness, Agnes mutters, but she doesn't object further. The Gilded Cup sits in the best part of town, its windows glowing with real glass and bright candlelight. Unlike the rough taverns you've visited so far, this one has an actual sign, a wooden cup covered in gold leaf, and a doorman checking patrons before they enter. You circle around to the back, finding the expected service entrance. Servers and kitchen staff hurry in and out carrying food and drink. The smell wafting from the kitchen makes your mouth water. Real meat, fresh bread, spices you can't afford. "How do we get in?" Richard whispers. You're considering the problem when the door bangs open and a harried-looking kitchen boy emerges, carrying a bucket of scraps. "Excuse me," Agnes calls softly. "We're looking for work. Any positions open?" The boy looks at your group suspiciously. You'd have to ask the steward, but he doesn't usually hire on the spot. "What about deliveries?" You try. "We have wine." You gesture vaguely behind you. "Kitchen's that way," the boy says, clearly not paid enough to care. "Tell them Henry sent you." With that minimal authorization, you slip through the service door into a busy kitchen. Cooks and servers rush around, preparing elaborate dishes for the wealthy patrons. No one gives you a second glance, assuming you belong there. "This way," James murmurs, guiding you through the kitchen toward a swinging door that presumably leads to the main tavern area. You pause at the door, peering through. The Gilded Cup is nothing like the taverns you're used to. The floors are clean wood, not packed earth. The tables are polished, set with real linen and silver cups. Candles of beeswax, not tallow, provide bright, sweet-smelling light. And the patrons? Merchants in fine wool, minor nobles, church officials, all conversing quietly over good wine. "There's William," Richard whispers, pointing discreetly. Sure enough, the tax collector is seated at a corner table with several other men. They're speaking intently, documents spread before them. From this distance, they could be discussing legitimate tax business or plotting treason. Impossible to tell. "We need to get closer," you decide. Agnes pulls a serving cloth from a nearby stack and ties it around her waist. "Follow my lead," she whispers, taking an empty tray. You watch in admiration as your wife transforms before your eyes, straightening her posture and adopting the deferential expression of a professional server. She walks confidently into the main room, tray held high, the picture of belonging. "That's my wife," you tell James and Richard proudly. "She's something else," James agrees, clearly impressed. Agnes makes her way through the tables, collecting empty cups as if that's her job. She works her way gradually toward William's table, eventually stopping right beside it to gather dishes. You watch tensely, ready to intervene if she's questioned, but Agnes plays her part perfectly. No one looks twice at a servant. After what feels like ages, she returns to the kitchen, her face tight with suppressed excitement. "Well?" You press once you've huddled in a quiet corner. "They're definitely counterfeiting," she confirms. "I heard Williams say they need to move the operation after what happened to the Chandler, and they're planning something tonight. A shipment of false coins going out with a wine merchant." "Did they mention the ring?" James asks urgently. Agnes nods. "William is worried. Says the scarred man, his name is Giles, by the way, is getting careless, drawing too much attention with his questions about the ring." "We should alert the constable," you say. "Not yet," James counters. "We still need the ring as evidence, and we need to catch them with the counterfeit coins." "The North Gate," Richard reminds you. "Eliza should be waiting by now." You nod. "Let's go get that ring, then we can decide our next move." As you slip back out through the service entrance, you can't help marvelling at how your quiet evening has transformed into this wild adventure, from a simple Cooper just this morning to investigating counterfeiting and murder, all because you drank too much last night. Medieval nights out, indeed. They never go quite as planned. You make your way through the town toward the north gate, sticking to shadows where possible. The streets are quieter now as the night deepens, though you can still hear music and voices from taverns you pass. Something doesn't feel right, Agnes murmurs as you approach the gate. You're about to ask what she means when you see it, or rather, who. The scarred man, Giles, is loitering near the gate, clearly waiting for someone. "He's looking for Eliza," James whispers. "He must have overheard us at the ruins." "So where is she?" Richard asks anxiously. You scan the area, finally spotting a small figure pressed into a shadowy doorway across the street. Eliza has seen the trap and is staying hidden. "We need to draw him away," you decide. "Give Eliza a chance to escape." "How?" Agnes asks practically. You think for a moment. "James and I will create a diversion. Agnes, you and Richard try to reach Eliza." "What kind of diversion?" James asks warily. You grin. "The kind medieval men excel at, a drunken brawl." And with that you stagger toward the gate, pulling James with you, ready to create the most convincing tavern fight of your life, without the benefit of actually being drunk this time. Medieval nightlife is many things, but boring isn't one of them. "Ready?" you mutter to James as you approach the north gate. "Not really," he admits. "I've never been in a tavern fight." "Just follow my lead, shove me, yell something insulting, and try to look angry." James nods nervously. Then, louder than necessary, he calls, "Watch where you're walking, you drunken fool." He gives you a shove that's far too gentle to be convincing. You mentally sigh, noblemen and their sheltered lives. "Who pushed me?" you bellow, spinning around dramatically. "Was it you, you prissy little man?" You give James a much more realistic shove that sends him stumbling backward. His eyes widen in surprise before he catches on and pushes back. "How dare you touch me?" he shouts, getting into the role. "Do you know who my father is?" "Don't know, don't care," you roar, taking a wild swing that deliberately misses his face by inches. The commotion is having the desired effect. People are turning to watch, and more importantly, Giles the Scarred Man has shifted his attention from watching for Eliza to observing your growing fight. "You fight like a woman," James taunts, then immediately looks horrified at his own words. You bite back a laugh and instead charge at him, tackling him around the waist. You both go down in the dirt, rolling around and making a tremendous racket. From the corner of your eye, you see Agnes and Richard slipping across the street toward Eliza's hiding spot. "Keep it up," you whisper as you pretend to grapple with James. "We need another minute." James, now fully committed to the performance, grabs a handful of your hair and yanks, not quite pretending anymore. "Ow, that actually hurt," you hiss. "Sorry," he whispers back. "Got carried away." Your theatrical brawl has drawn quite a crowd now. Medieval entertainment is live and unscripted. A good fight is better than any play. Someone's even taking bets on who'll win. "The skinny one's got spirit, but my money's on the big fellow," you hear someone comment. "3 pennies on the small one," another voice calls. "He fights dirty. Look at that hair pull." Giles has moved closer, watching with the others. He doesn't look entirely convinced by your performance, but at least his attention is divided. You risk a glance across the street. Agnes, Richard and Eliza are nowhere to be seen. Good, they've made it away. "Let's finish this," you mutter to James. With an exaggerated roar, you lift James up and pretend to slam him down, though you actually take most of his weight yourself. He groans convincingly and goes limp. "And stay down," you shout, staggering to your feet and making a show of dusting yourself off. The crowd gives appreciative cheers and jeers. Money changes hands as bets are settled. "Nothing to see here," you announce, swaying slightly as if drunk. "Just teaching this mouthy apprentice some respect." James, playing his part, stays down and moans pathetically. The crowd begins to disperse. Disappointed, the entertainment is over. Giles lingers longer than the others, his eyes narrowed suspiciously, but eventually he too moves away, heading back toward the centre of town. Once he's out of sight, you help James up. Not bad for your first tavern brawl, he grimaces, brushing dirt from his clothes. Is this how commoners typically settle disagreements? Only when we're sober enough to miss each other when we swing, you joke. Come on, let's find the others. You make your way to the predetermined meeting spot, a small shrine to St. Nicholas near the north wall. Agnes, Richard and Eliza are waiting in its shadow. "Did you get it?" you ask immediately. Eliza nods, pulling a small bundle from inside her bodice, the medieval equivalent of a secure pocket. "Here," she says, unwrapping a cloth to reveal a gold signet ring with an ornate family crest. James snatches it eagerly, examining it in the dim light. "Thank God," he breathes, sliding it onto his finger. "My father would have killed me if this was lost." "What about the people who actually did kill someone?" Agnes reminds him pointedly. James has the grace to look abashed. "Yes, of course, the counterfeiters. We need to catch them with evidence," you say. "Eliza, what else do you know about their operation?" She glances around nervously before speaking. "Not much. But I heard William say something about a midnight shipment leaving from behind the Gilded Cup. Something about wine barrels." Your professional interest is piqued. Wine barrels? That's a good hiding place for counterfeit coins. The barrels would have secret compartments built in. "Who's the cooper who made them?" Richard asks, professional pride evident in his voice. "Does it matter?" James asks impatiently. "Actually, yes," you reply. "If I know who made them, I might know how the compartments work." Eliza shrugs. "No idea, but they're being loaded onto a merchant's wagon tonight. Edmund Blackwell's, I think." Agnes gasps. "Blackwell? He's one of the wealthiest merchants in town, and married to Lady Isabella," James adds. "My father does business with him." The pieces click into place. A respected merchant would be the perfect accomplice for moving counterfeit currency. His wagons travel between towns without much scrutiny, and he handles large sums of money regularly enough that no one would question new coins in his possession. So William and Giles make the coins, Blackwell moves them, and they all get rich while devaluing the king's currency, you summarise. "And they kill anyone who finds out," Richard adds grimly. "We need to alert the constable," Agnes insists. "With what proof?" James counters. "We need to catch them in the act. The midnight shipment," you decide. "If we can catch them loading the false coins." "I should go," Eliza says suddenly. "They'll notice I'm missing from the tavern." "Will you be safe?" Agnes asks with genuine concern. Eliza gives a bitter laugh. "Safe? Women like me are never safe, but I know how to handle myself." "Thank you," James says with surprising sincerity. "You didn't have to help us." "I didn't do it for you," she replies bluntly. "I did it because I don't want Martin's murder ignored just because he was common born." With that, she slips away into the darkness, heading back toward the Boar's Head. "Brave girl," Agnes comments, watching her go. "And not wrong about justice for common folk," you add. "If Martin had been a nobleman, half the king's guard would be searching for his killer." James shifts uncomfortably but doesn't argue. The inequality of medieval justice isn't something he can deny. "What now?" Richard asks. "It's hours until midnight." "We need a better plan than just watching from the shadows," you say. "And maybe some help." "The constable," Agnes begins. "Not yet," James interrupts. "If Blackwell really is involved, he has enough influence to make accusations against him disappear. We need irrefutable proof." You think for a moment. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." An hour later, you're questioning your own sanity as you crouch in a filthy alley behind the Gilded Cup. Agnes and Richard are positioned as lookouts at either end of the street, while you and James wait near the tavern's back door. Your plan is simple but dangerous. When the counterfeit coins are brought out to be loaded, you'll create a distraction while James verifies they're in the wine barrels. Then you'll both run to the night watchman's station and report the crime in progress. "This is madness," James whispers for the 10th time. "If they catch us..." "They won't," you promise, with more confidence than you feel. The back door of the Gilded Cup opens, spilling yellow light into the alley. A server tosses out a bucket of kitchen scraps, narrowly missing your hiding spot. "People actually live like this?" James mutters, recoiling from the smell. "In filth and darkness?" "Not by choice," you remind him. "Some of us don't have monastery guest rooms to retreat to." He falls silent, perhaps truly considering the vast gulf between his life and yours for the first time. More activity at the back door draws your attention. Two men emerge, carrying what looks like a small chest between them. William the tax collector follows, glancing nervously up and down the alley. "Where's Blackwell?" one of the men asks. "Coming," William replies. "Had to make his goodbyes seem natural. Don't want anyone wondering why he left early." The men set down the chest in the shadows. You nudge James and point. That must be the counterfeiting tools, or perhaps the coins themselves. A few minutes later, the door opens again. Edmund Blackwell steps out, now dressed for travel in a heavy cloak despite the mild night. "Is everything ready?" he asks William. "Yes, just waiting for the wagon." As if on cue, the sound of wagon wheels and horse hooves comes from the street. A moment later, a small covered wagon appears at the alley entrance, driven by a nervous-looking young man. "My apprentice," Blackwell explains. "Trustworthy and discreet." The wagon backs into the alley. In the dim light, you can make out several wine barrels loaded in the back. "Those are from Simmons' workshop," you whisper to James. "See the marking? The widow Simmons' late husband made those." "Is that important?" James asks. "Maybe. They're good barrels, but I know how he made his secret compartments." The men begin transferring the contents of the chest into the wine barrels, removing the false bottoms just as you suspected. Even from your hiding place you can hear the distinctive clink of metal, coins, and lots of them. "That's our evidence," you whisper. "Now we need to..." A sudden shout from the street interrupts you. "Stop night watch." Your blood runs cold. That wasn't part of the plan. Everything happens at once. The counterfeiters freeze, Blackwell curses, and Richard appears at the alley entrance, pointing dramatically. There they are, officers the counterfeiters, just like I told you. Four night watchmen push past him, clubs raised. "Nobody move!" their leader shouts. William makes a break for it, darting toward the tavern door. One of the watchmen tackles him, bringing him down hard on the cobblestones. "Richard, you idiot!" you hiss. "We weren't ready." "Sorry," he stage whispers back. They were about to change patrol. It was now or wait another hour. The night watchmen have everyone against the wall now. Blackwell, his apprentice, and the two men who were loading the coins. William is being hauled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. "Check the barrels," the lead watchman orders. One of his men does so, pulling out handfuls of silver coins. "Counterfeits, sir. Good ones, but still false." "Arrest them all," the leader orders. "Counterfeiting is treason against the king." You and James exchange glances. Your plan worked. Sort of, though. For 40 years, Frank Glazer lived a life that would kill most men in days. He crossed freezing rivers alone, out-tracked native hunters, shot wolves for the government but respected them more than most humans, and called a dirt-floored cabin home for 13 brutal winters. He walked the line between hunter and naturalist, killer and caretaker, myth and man. Here's what life was really like for Alaska's most fearless mountain man you've never heard of. Before we start, if these stories help you sleep, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. Comment where you're at and the time too. Kind of fun seeing all the different places. Someone from Iceland commented once and I had to Google what time zone that even is. Okay, tonight we're heading to Alaska in 1915, but before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. You wake up to pitch darkness, the kind of darkness that swallows everything. Your breath clouds in front of your face, visible even in the dim light. It's so cold your nose hairs have frozen, not like the gentle chill that has you reaching for an extra blanket. We're talking about the kind of cold that kills. This is Alaska, 1915, and right now you're Frank Glazer. 26 years old, single, done with normal life. A few hours ago, you walked out of Washington State with 2 duffels, a .306 Winchester rifle, binoculars, and what the locals might call a hunger for chaos. You've just stepped off the SS Mariposa onto Alaskan soil, and what greets you isn't a welcome committee. It's 25 feet of snow in Thompson Pass. You'll never make it, someone tells you. 3 men died trying to reach Fairbanks last month. You just adjust your pack straps and keep walking. See, the thing about Frank Glazer that made him different, he wasn't running to something. He wasn't chasing gold or glory like everyone else flooding into Alaska back then. He was just done. Done with whatever passed for civilization back in Washington. Done with people, probably. I came to Alaska looking for game, he'd say years later. What I found was something wilder. What he found was a 371-mile death march to Fairbanks. I'm serious. That's what it was. No roads, no trains, just a crude trail through what locals described as part sludge pit, part ice trap, part murder alley, and Frank walked right into it without blinking. The locals in Valdez didn't sugarcoat it. Too much snow in the pass, they warned, and rivers got no bridges. 2 men got killed in Copper Center last fall. You know what most people would do hearing that? Turn around, get back on the boat, tell everyone back home, yeah, I tried Alaska, wasn't for me, not Frank. Instead, he finds an old sourdough. That's what they called the experienced pioneers, the ones who'd survived at least one winter, and convinces the guy to be his trail partner. Frank shoves his supplies into a rucksack and they hit the trail. The rest of the newcomers, the soft city chichacos as the locals called them, were hauling way too much gear and wearing what might as well have been dress shoes. Once they hit waist-deep snow, they broke. Feet sore, packs soaked, spirits crushed. Picture this, you're knee-deep in snow that sometimes goes up to your waist, your boots are soaked through, your toes are numb, then painful, then numb again, which is worse because that's when frostbite sets in. One guy named Knockout Solomon, and I'm not making that up, was cursing non-stop because his fancy high-end boots basically chewed his feet into raw meat. Should have gone with moose hide, the sourdough probably told him. Too late now, but Frank just kept walking. I've been outdoors, I've hiked, I've camped, but this was a different universe of hardship. The nights were brutal, the snow would crust just enough to make you think it was solid, then cave in without warning. You'd plunge waist deep, have to claw your way out, then take 2 more steps and repeat the whole process. You'll never make it unless it crusts again tonight, the owner of Ptarmigan Drop Roadhouse told them. Frank didn't wait. Waiting meant frostbite or worse. The thing about Alaska that I don't think we can even comprehend today is the rivers. Today we've got bridges, right? Highways, GPS. Back then, you'd hit a river and there'd be nothing. No bridge, no boat, just an icy torrent cutting through your path. So what do? Well, if you're Frank Glazer in 1915, the answer is simple and also completely insane. You strip naked. Yeah, In temperatures that could freeze spit before it hits the ground, you take off your clothes, you bundle them up with your gear to keep them dry, then you wade through a river so cold it feels like your skin is being sliced open with every step. One time, Frank actually soaked his bleeding feet in the freezing water, then dried them, pulled on fresh socks, and kept moving. That toughened me up, he said later, like it was nothing, like stepping into ice water with open wounds was just a normal Tuesday. I'd have quit right there, would have been like, you know what, Washington State wasn't so bad. The roadhouses came every 20 miles or so. Some were open, some were boarded up tight. At Upper Tonsina, Frank got a bed and immediately regretted it. His trail partner took one look at him the next day and said, "You're lousy, Glazer. Should have checked the bed." Lousy as in covered in lice. After that, Frank chose stars over sheets. Decided he'd rather freeze than itch. That sourdough partner eventually peeled off to work a mine, and so Frank went solo, that's right, alone in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, without GPS or cell phones or Gore-Tex or any of the high-tech gear we'd consider essential today. He slept by day and hiked by night, constantly scanning for game, for shelter, for anything that seemed off. He'd developed this sixth sense already, something that would define him for the next 4 decades, an awareness of everything around him, a way of reading the wild like it was sending him signals no one else could hear. At Copper Center, he developed what locals called musher's knee, this deep, grinding ache from dragging 60 pounds through mud and snow. The local fix? Stand in an icy stream until your legs go numb, dry off, keep going. I mean, the medical care back then was basically just various forms of torture that sometimes accidentally helped. And this remedy, it sounds insane, but it actually worked. The cold reduced inflammation, numbed the pain. People who live in extreme environments develop extreme solutions. You know what's interesting about that trail? A historian once told me? It didn't just test your body, it messed with your head. Copper Center had stories that would follow Frank. There, the McRaes bred silver and black foxes worth a fortune. Frank learned quick that if you mess with a nesting vixen, she'll kill her own pups rather than let them be taken. He also heard about a triple murder from the previous fall. One guy's arm turned up in a sled dog's mouth, another had 7.22 bullets in his back. Picture yourself there. You're alone in the wilderness, it's getting dark, and you've just heard about dismembered bodies being found in this exact area. Plus, now the snow is turning to bog, which means mosquitoes. Not the annoying kind we deal with in summer. We're talking swarms so thick they could block out the sun. They hit like they'd been starving for weeks. Frank picked up a bed net at a trading post. Might have been the smartest thing he ever bought, an old-timer told me. In Galkana, he passed a signal corps shack where a lynx lounged on the desk and rode stray dogs like ponies. Tame Dal sheep climbed haylofts, foxes twitched in wire cages, marten farms bloomed in the mud. It's like the wild and civilization blurred into one weird mess. That's Alaska for you. Places where the rules we take for granted just don't apply. Then came sourdough, not a person, a roadhouse, and not just any roadhouse. This one was run by swearing Molly, 6'2", sharp-tongued, didn't take crap from anyone. She cursed like a dock worker and cooked like a chef. When Frank showed up, she was mid-rant, chasing some poor guy out with a storm of insults. Then she looked at Frank like nothing had happened and said, "You hungry? Come in, have some coffee." Her place was spotless. Carpeted floors, curtained windows, warm fire. It was a magnet for traders, trappers, drifters, anyone with a story or scars. Molly ran the joint like a queen. Once she got sweet on a driver named Jack Bishop, he mailed her a fake gold nugget made of salt. She showed it off all summer, thought she'd struck it rich. When the truth came out, she vowed revenge, then forgave him by spring. That was Molly, fire and grace wrapped up in boots. When Frank left, the ground got worse. Spruce log roads turned to deep, sucking mud. The trail climbed again past Paxton Lake, past Summit Lake, both frozen solid in May. Somewhere along the ice, Frank met Bobby Sheldon, the first guy to drive from Fairbanks to Valdez. He was hacking at ice, trying to drag a busted Model T across it. Frank jumped in, swinging tools for hours. Bobby was a real pioneer, Frank would say later, almost with admiration, which wasn't something he gave out easily. A miner named Matt McGovern, 52, joined Frank for a stretch. Decent guy until he almost shot Frank while fiddling with a pistol. Then McGovern remembered he'd left $400 in a vest back at Paxton's, about $11,000 in today's money. The guy turned around, ran all the way back and came grinning with the cash like it was no big deal. These people weren't normal, none of them, including Frank. They timed river crossings for noon before meltwater swelled from the day's sun. Midnight hits and those rivers will kill you, Frank said. One wrong step and you're gone. He saw it happen later. Sheldon lost a whole Model T to a river and spent weeks pretending to pan gold out of the wreck. I guess when you lose everything, you either break down or make jokes. At Yost's Roadhouse, things turned gloomy. 12 people had frozen to death there one winter. Blizzards blinded travellers just yards from the door. The army had put up a fence and a bell that clanged in the wind, hoping it might save the next poor soul who got caught out there. Frank also heard about stagecoach passengers dumped in a whiteout, crawling blind in the snow while a signal corps sergeant dragged them in one at a time. And past Yost's, the wild bit back. Grizzly tracks the size of snowshoes crossed the trail. Frank always kept his rifle loaded and close. Snowshoe hares bolted like sparks, tearing bark off willows like locusts. The rhythm out there was simple. Eat, freeze, survive, repeat. By the time Frank limped into Fairbanks, he was wrecked. Scarred from lice, feet shredded, eyes hollow. He'd walked nearly 400 miles through some of the nastiest terrain on the continent. Broke, beat up, tough as rawhide, but he'd made it. He was home, nobody there to greet him. No parade, no handshake, no welcome to Fairbanks banner. Just a raw frontier town full of people either chasing fortune or running from something. Frank wasn't doing either. He was just looking for a place where he could be alone with the wild, a place that would test him every day, a place where survival wasn't taken for granted. He found it, and in doing so, he found himself. You lie in your bed. Unlike Frank, who slept on frozen ground or in lousy roadhouses, you pull your blanket tighter, grateful for walls that keep out the wind, for running water that isn't a freezing river you have to cross naked, for the simple luxury of being warm, of being safe. And as you drift, you wonder, what would make a man choose that life? What was Frank Glazer running from? Or maybe, what was he running toward? This was just the beginning. Frank Glazer's Alaskan adventure had only just begun, and the wild was waiting to test him in ways he couldn't imagine. The wolves hadn't even entered his story yet, but they would, soon enough. Frank Glazer didn't hunt for sport. He hunted to eat, to survive, to make a dollar. In Alaska, meat was currency, and currency meant staying alive. Frank limped into Fairbanks with feet torn to shreds, his body battered from the journey, but his eyes, they were scanning the horizon already. He saw nothing but wild country stretched in every direction and went straight to work. From 1915 to 1924, Frank was what they called a market hunter. In those days, before supermarkets and refrigerated trucks, the people in frontier towns like Fairbanks needed meat. Miners, traders, roadhouse operators, they all had money, but they didn't have the time or skills to hunt. That's where men like Frank came in. He scouted the Alaska range, picked his grounds, and got busy. The rhythm was simple: shoot, butcher, haul, sell, repeat. You're probably thinking, wait, he just walked 371 miles through hell and now he's going hunting? Yeah, that's exactly what he did. No rest, no recovery time. The wilderness doesn't give you a break just because you're tired. Frank moved through the slopes near the Valdez Trail like a shadow. Caribou, Dall sheep, moose. He tracked them through silence, through storms, knew their patterns like a map burned into his head. He carried that .306 Winchester like it was part of his arm. When Frank raised that rifle, one guy said years later, something dropped every time. He packed light when he hunted. Just the rifle, some ammunition, basic supplies. He'd disappear into the backcountry for days at a time. No radio, no backup, just Frank and whatever animal he was tracking. When he returned to civilization, he hauled hundreds of pounds of meat, sometimes dragging it through snow on a makeshift sled, sometimes packing it over ridgeline trails on his back. He sold it for 25 cents a pound. That's about $7 in today's money. There was no show to it, no ego, just blood, cold, and the math of survival. "How do you know where to find that moose?" someone once asked him. Frank just shrugged. "You listen to what the land's telling you." One time he dropped a moose cow deep in the woods, miles from anywhere. Most hunters would have taken the choice cuts and left the rest. Not Frank. He hauled the meat out solo, load by load, over 3 days, slept under spruce boughs when skies were clear, huddled by warm rocks when they weren't. No partner, no backup. "I got used to it," he said later. "Didn't need anybody. I had the animals." Game was thick in Alaska back then, and surprisingly fearless. Animals hadn't learned to fear humans yet. There just weren't enough people around. He once spotted Dall sheep across a canyon. They didn't see him. He belly crawled a mile through frozen brush, picked one, dropped it, then skinned it in the snow and packed it home. For Frank, there was no thrill in the kill, just meat, money, and calculating how long it would last. You have to understand, market hunting wasn't a job, it was survival. There were no roads, no shortcuts, just rough trails, steep climbs, deep creeks, 1 minute sun, next minute blizzard. The weather turns on you up there, an old-timer told me once. No warning, blue sky can go white in 10 minutes, then you're in trouble. Once, a storm pinned Frank down for 3 days. He crawled under spruce boughs, a moose carcass just yards away. The wind howled like a banshee. That's not just a saying, that's actually what it sounds like when wind cuts through black spruce at 40 below. Frank curled up in his sleeping bag and hoped the bears didn't smell the meat. "Too cold to worry," he said later. "Too cold to move." Food ran thin often. He shot ptarmigan when he could find them, those Arctic grouse that turn white in winter. When game was scarce, he boiled bones and scraps, dug roots, picked bulbs, ate whatever the land offered. "I didn't waste nothing," he said. "If I killed it, I used it." Unlike trophy hunters, Frank didn't care about antlers unless they meant extra cash. "I never shot cows if I could help it," he said. Same with ewes. Took bulls, took rams, left the breeders. He didn't do this out of some ethical stance or conservation mindset. It was pure logic. If you kill the breeding females, there won't be any game next year. And if there's no game, you starve. Frank hunted where the ground tried to kill you. Loose rock, ice-covered logs, steep slopes, places where a twisted ankle meant death. Rivers like the Delta and Little Tock weren't just cold, they were deadly. In spring, they rose fast, fed by snowmelt. One crossing, he lost half a moose when his pack slipped. Meat gone. "Damn shame," he said. "That was good meat." His rifle was part of him. Even in his 60s, he wore no glasses. He could spot fur on a ridge at distances that made other hunters squint. The gun was always loaded, always within reach, not just for hunting, for protection. If you've never been in bear country, you can't understand what it means to be prey. In most of our modern lives, we're at the top of the food chain. We don't think about being eaten, but in Alaska, especially back then, you were just another animal. And often you weren't the biggest or the strongest. The winters were dead quiet. Snow muffled every sound. Wind whispered through trees. Frank went weeks without hearing a human voice. I never got lonesome, he told a writer named Jim Reardon years later. I had my rifle, I had work to do. He packed meat to roadhouses and camps, anywhere that paid. $0.25 a pound mattered when you had nothing. I could pack 100 pounds easy, Frank said. Did it all the time. His journal entries from those years don't ramble, just facts, clipped and direct. Shot 2 moose, packed 1 down, too much snow for dogs, slept rough, snowed all night. Another entry, wind bad, nearly lost sled, killed 1 caribou, feet froze. There was no room for mistakes. Twist a knee, you're stuck. No food, you starve. Break an ankle, you die. But Frank didn't slow down. He kept moving, tracking, hauling, hustling meat through deep snow and dead silence just to earn $1. No rangers, no safety net, just you, your rifle, and whatever you could carry out. You're lying in your warm bed right now, maybe sipping something hot, comfortable, safe. Frank went years without any of that. Years where each day was a fight to survive, where comfort was a luxury he couldn't afford. You know what really stands out about Frank during these years? He was alone, completely alone, but he wasn't running from people. He wasn't some misanthrope who hated humanity. He just preferred the quiet, the simplicity of survival, the honest transaction between him and the wild. People complicate things, he said once. Animals are straight with you. They're trying to live, same as you. No lies, no games. The hunting was hard physical labour, but it suited him. Up before dawn most days, moving through forest and tundra in silence, reading tracks, watching wind direction, checking snow conditions. Frank spoke the wild's language, moved through it like he belonged. "Game's smarter than you think," he said once. "You got to outthink it, outwalk it, outfreeze it if that's what it takes." The Alaska Range, where Frank did most of his hunting, is brutal country. Peaks jutting up to 13,000 feet, valleys so deep they don't see sun for months in winter, glaciers that can swallow you whole if you step wrong. Frank knew every ridge, every pass. He learned the terrain inch by inch, paid for that knowledge with frozen fingers and hungry nights. He had a map in his head, said Oscar Vogel, who knew him later, more detailed than anything on paper. Most market hunters worked in pairs at least, sharing the load, watching each other's backs. Frank preferred going solo, less talk, more focus. No one to slow him down or second-guess his decisions, and his decisions were absolute. If he decided to cross a pass in a storm, that's what he did. If he chose to track a bull moose for 3 days, he stayed with it until the job was done. One winter, temperatures dropped to 60 below for 2 weeks straight. Most hunters stayed in, waited it out. Frank kept working. He'd build small fires, just enough to keep his hands functioning, then move on, keep the blood flowing, stay alive. Cold will kill you, a trapper told me once, but so will sitting still. It's a balance. Frank found that balance. He respected the cold, prepared for it, but never surrendered to it. There was one close call in 1920. Frank was tracking a caribou herd near the Tok River when a storm blew in from nowhere. Visibility dropped to zero, wind howling, snow blasting sideways. He lost the trail, lost his bearings. For 3 hours he wandered, growing colder by the minute. Most people would have panicked. Frank just kept moving, working in a grid pattern until he found a familiar landmark, a lightning-struck spruce he recognized even in the whiteout. From there, he navigated to a line shack he knew was nearby, spent 3 days there, waiting out the storm. "Wasn't worried," he said later, "just inconvenienced." The man's capacity for understatement was legendary. By 1924, Frank had established himself as one of the most reliable meat hunters in interior Alaska. Store owners would pay premium prices for his game because they knew it would be properly dressed, properly handled. Frank's meat never spoiled, one shopkeeper said. Man knew how to treat an animal from kill to kitchen. But something was changing in Frank. Years alone in the wild, watching animals, tracking them, killing them, it changes a person. You start to see patterns, start to understand the balance of things. Frank was noticing wolves more and more, seeing how they hunted, how they moved, how they lived. They fascinated him, not as targets, as teachers. The wolves of Alaska were different from those in the lower 48. Bigger, for one thing. 130 pounds wasn't uncommon. Smart, too. They hunted in coordinated packs, taking down moose 10 times their size. Frank watched them whenever he could, made notes, observed their habits. He wasn't studying them scientifically. He was learning from them, the way they chose their prey, the way they moved through snow, the way they conserved energy. Wolves don't waste effort, he told a biologist years later. They don't show off. They do what needs doing, then rest. People could learn from that. Most hunters hated wolves, saw them as competition, as vermin to be eliminated. Frank saw them differently, with respect, maybe even admiration. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't sentimental about them. He still hunted, still killed for meat and money, but he recognized something in those wolves. A kindred spirit, maybe. Another survivor in a land that killed the careless. Winter in Alaska isn't just cold, it's dark. Near the Arctic Circle, the sun barely rises in December and January. Just a few hours of twilight, then darkness again. It messes with your head all that night. Frank adapted, started using the darkness like wolves do, hunting at dusk and dawn when prey is moving, but visibility still works in your favour. He became nocturnal when needed, diurnal when that made more sense. You don't fight the land, he said. You don't fight the weather or the light. You work with what's given. By the end of 1924, Frank was looking for something different. The market hunting was steady work, but it wasn't challenging him anymore. He wanted something more permanent, something he could build. He'd been eyeing a spot along the Savage River, deep in what's now Denali National Park. Remote, wild, game-rich, perfect. That fall, he made his decision. He'd build a cabin there, stake his claim, make it home. I wanted a place, he said simply, just a place that was mine. For nearly a decade, Frank had lived like a ghost, passing through the Alaska wilderness, leaving almost no trace. Now he was ready to put down roots, just not anywhere near other people. The Savage River would be his home for the next 13 years, and there in that isolated valley the legend of the Wolfman would truly begin. That's where we'll pick up next. Frank building his cabin on the Savage River, a home so remote that months would pass without him seeing another human face, a place where wolves would become his closest neighbours, his subjects of study, and eventually his prey. But that night, As he prepared for this new chapter, Frank Glazer slept under stars so bright and cold they seemed to burn. The northern lights danced green and purple across the black sky. The temperature dropped to 30 below. And Frank, wrapped in his sleeping bag beside a small fire, was exactly where he wanted to be. You pull your blanket a little tighter, thinking about that kind of cold, the kind that burns your lungs when you breathe, the kind that turns your breath to ice crystals that fall tinkling to the ground. You're warm, comfortable, safe. Frank Glazer chose to live without any of that comfort in exchange for something most of us will never understand: absolute freedom, absolute solitude, absolute independence. Was it worth it? For Frank, there was never any question. The wild had claimed him. He belonged to Alaska now. Frank Glazer built his Savage River cabin in 10 days flat. No crew, no plans, no power tools, just an axe, muscle, and a brain made for solving problems in the middle of nowhere. Picture yourself in his boots for a second. It's 1924. There's no Home Depot, no YouTube tutorials, no one to call if things go wrong. Just you, standing in a clearing, surrounded by spruce trees and silence, thinking, all right, I need a place that will keep me alive through winter. And winter in Alaska isn't your average winter. It's not grab another sweater cold. It's your spit freezes before it hits the ground cold. It's make one mistake and they'll find your body in spring cold. The cabin Frank built wasn't pretty. Sod roof, dirt floor, logs sealed with mud, ugly as sin but warm, and it was his. Every inch of it came from his own hands. The location was deliberate, deep in the Alaska range. No roads, no people, just how he liked it. By 1924, Frank was done with towns, done with anything resembling civilization. Savage River gave him space, game, and peace. He stayed 13 years. Most people can't stay in one apartment for 13 months without getting restless. I needed a place where I could hear myself think, he told a visitor years later. Fairbanks was getting too crowded. Fairbanks at the time had maybe 2,000 people. The winters there could freeze your lungs when you breathed too deeply, but Frank didn't care. He thrived in conditions that would kill most people in hours. No neighbours, no noise, just wind and wolves. Those wolves, their howls echoed through the valleys at night. When most people heard that sound, they reached for a rifle. When Frank heard it, he listened, really listened, started to learn the different tones, the various messages. Wolves talk to each other, he said once. Not like people talk, better, no lies in it. The cabin became his headquarters. From there, he trapped, hunted, and sometimes hiked blind through blizzards. No compass, just instinct. I always knew where I was, he said years later. Could read the country like a book. His journal from those years was all business. Snowed all night. Cut firewood. Wolf tracks near trapline. But between those clipped lines, life was incredibly rough. When food ran low, he boiled spruce bark for tea. He skinned frozen kills by lantern light, his fingers blue with cold. He dried soaked boots by the stove, knowing that wet feet meant death when temperatures hit 50 below. He always kept his rifle loaded and within reach, not for wolves, but for grizzlies. Spring brought them in close, hungry after hibernation, ready to claim whatever food they could find. One journal entry read simply, "Had a hell of a time crossing river." That's all he wrote. But years later, he told the full story. Swept into an ice-choked current, rifle under one arm, pack-soaked, boots dragging like anchors. He clawed his way to shore, half-frozen but alive. In his journal. Just those 8 words. The man didn't waste breath, even on paper. Here's where Frank's story takes a turn that makes him different from other mountain men, other trappers. He didn't just live near wolves, he raised them. Each spring he'd find dens, snatch a few pups and bring them home. He raised them alongside his sled dogs. The result? A team of half-wild, all-muscle hybrids he called wolf dogs. They'd fight like devils, he said, but run like hell when you hooked them up. He fed them caribou scraps, watched how they moved, named them King, Queenie. They weren't pets. Frank didn't do pets. They were workers, partners, a piece of the wild, leashed but never truly tamed. You know how some people get really into their hobbies, like they start making sourdough bread, and suddenly their Instagram is nothing but loaf pictures. Frank got like that with wolves, but there was no Instagram. Just him, alone in his cabin, turning into an amateur scientist. Inside the cabin, Frank became a field biologist without even realizing it. He tracked prints in the snow, studied scat, took detailed notes, sketched wolf movements in the margins of his journal. The walls of his cabin gradually filled with observations, notes on pack structure, hunting patterns, communication, not because anyone asked him to, not for money or fame, just because the wolves fascinated him. By the mid-1930s, Frank dug deeper into wolf study. Alone in his Savage River cabin, something changed. The hunter became a student. He observed how wolves hunted, how they took down the weak, old, or slow prey. People say they kill for fun, he wrote in a note to himself. Not true. They kill to live, and they're better at it than most men. They used their heads, he noticed. Didn't rush, waited, worked together, set up ambushes, cut animals out from herds, tested for weakness before committing to a kill. He saw the dark side too. Wolves turned on their own when resources got scarce. One mistake during a hunt could get you ostracized or dead. They're cold like that, Frank said. No second chances. He took notes on everything. Kills, tracks, scat, even how high they peed on trees. This stuff mattered to Frank. It wasn't just curiosity, it was survival knowledge. Understanding wolves meant understanding the wild. Even professional biologists eventually came to him with questions. A scientist named Adolph Murray used Frank's notes in his book, The Wolves of Mount McKinley. Government officials treated Frank like a field guide in boots. He knew wolves top to bottom, said trapper Oscar Vogel years later, taught me tricks I'd never thought of, and the twist? The more Frank learned, the less he hated them. Yes, he still trapped them when necessary. Yes, he still saw them as competition for game. But something had changed in his perspective. Eliminating wolves? Frank hated that idea, according to fellow agent Jim King years later. It wasn't about wiping them out. It was about balance. By his 50s, folks just called him the Wolf Man. A letter with just that name could still reach him in Fairbanks. He didn't pick the nickname, but it fit. He could track a wolf like it was his brother. He knew where they slept, where they crossed rivers, where they chewed bones in the sun. Frank wasn't soft, but he was fair. Wolves, he said, were survivors, and in Alaska, that was the highest compliment. But Savage River wasn't just about blood and biology. It was isolation, deep and harsh, the kind modern people can barely comprehend. Frank could go months without seeing another soul. Winter arrived early up there, usually by September. Snow buried his cabin to the eaves. Temperatures dropped past 50 below and stayed there for weeks. Firewood ran low. Frostbite took pieces of his ears, his nose, his fingers. Yet he never complained, never even seemed to notice the hardship. I had what I needed, he said. Meat, water, quiet. What else is there? Sometimes midwinter, he swore he heard voices, the isolation playing tricks on his mind. Once, a grizzly raided his meat stash but left no tracks in the fresh snow. Must have been a ghost, he said. Maybe joking, maybe not. Up there, the line between reality and imagination gets thin when you go months without human contact. The solitude affected people differently. Some broke down, couldn't handle it. Frank seemed to need it, like most people need air. "You want to know what silence really sounds like?" he once asked a young trapper. "Come to my place mid-January. That's silence. So quiet, you can hear the blood moving in your ears." One winter, a storm pinned him in the cabin for 3 weeks straight, wind howling, snow piling up so high he had to tunnel out to check his traps. Most people would go stir-crazy. Frank just worked on his wolf notes, repaired gear, read the few books he kept. "Gave me time to think," was all he said about it. His day-to-day existence was all about routine. Wake with the dim winter light around 10 a.m, build up the fire, melt snow for water, check snares close to the cabin, split wood,